He refused to forgive himself. He reconciled with life while doing life. The violence, the brutality, and years of questioning that followed. Did he care? Did she matter to him?
Nothing. Words are weak in the face of all this. But I want you to know that whatever you require of me, whatever questions you need to ask, I am available to you.
Despite the prison walls, Agnes and Leonard are talking. They live in Florida, one of the most repressive states in the country. A state where it is illegal for victims and offenders to meet. The United States have the world's highest incarceration rate, but the judicial system, exclusively centered on a punitive approach, hasn't succeeded in reducing the crime level. In the face of this failure, voices are raised to put forward another idea of justice, restorative justice, in which the victim and the offender try to overcome their trauma together. This is the unexpected path Agnes Fury has chosen to take with Leonard Scovens.
I got strung out on crack cocaine when I was 19 years old. A couple of years after, I murdered an ex-girlfriend and her son, Christopher Reed. Right now, I'm serving a life sentence, a natural life sentence for those murders.
After the murders of my daughter and my grandson, initially I was very numb. Then for weeks and months, I was very depressed. Well, part of my healing process involved writing. I also had an opportunity to participate in a program where I got to meet people who were engaged in restorative justice practices. Over time, I felt like I really wanted to talk with this man. I wanted to understand, I wanted to know who he was. And I discovered that it wasn't possible while he was in prison that they would not permit me to visit with him. So I wrote to him. And we began a correspondence that has continued for now 11 years.
When Agnes found me, this was 2005. I was on close management at Florida State Prison. And close management is solitary confinement for Florida prisoners who do wild stuff while in prison. So I was like I think I was on my third or fourth year of solitary confinement and really trying to struggle to find a reason to hang on to some kind of humanity, a sense of humanity within myself. It's hard sometimes in this environment to hold on to that because you have a lot of very ill people here.
I felt like I had to make something good out of the whole thing. And I know that my daughter was trying to be helpful to a hurting young man, and I wanted to do something that would break these cycles of violence. If she felt strongly enough that he was worth helping, that she took him in and took this chance, then that was a message to me that he might be worth knowing.
Instead of asking what law was broken, who broke it, and how do we punish them, restorative justice asks, who was harmed? What do they need? And whose obligation is it to meet those needs?
She chose a very, very difficult road. And at that particular time, she did not have anybody encouraging her to follow the path that she's followed. There were more people in her life who, would rather her have wanted me to get the death penalty.
Had Leonard been sentenced to death, then it would have been many years of more hearings, even if he were executed quickly, that still would not heal me. What that would do would leave me responsible for the death of another human being. And there's no way I ever want to live with that. And Pat's older children You know, how do you explain to children that it was a terrible thing what he did, but now it's a good thing that we kill him? Makes no sense. It's not a message I'm willing to carry.
In Tallahassee, Florida, two other families, the Gramers and the McBrides, have chosen to face together the tragedy that hit them. When Connor McBride killed his fiancée, Anne Gramer, Anne's parents fought to organize a restorative justice circle before the trial. This was a first in the United States. Thanks to this initiative, Connor is currently serving a 20-year sentence when he could have spent his whole life behind bars.
We had a passionate relationship, but also a very toxic relationship. I had a severe anger problem, and one day I snapped, and I shot her and I killed her. I always thought of myself as pretty much a regular guy. So the fact that this happened to me, it could happen to anyone. However, it ultimately came down to I made a bad choice. I made a terrible choice. The thinking and the rationale behind that choice, I cannot explain.
Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done.
As anybody who's a parent can imagine, I mean, your mind just goes to a million different places. I couldn't possibly imagine how it could have happened and what had happened.
The detective said that they were having an argument outside our house. Connor went back into the house, loaded my shotgun to take his own life. But the ensuing interaction, she was shot. Once in town, I went straight to TMH and up to intensive care. The hall and waiting room were packed. Kate and Annie Gromer were across a sea of people. I felt like a cartoon character that was shrinking where it didn't belong.
And so I walked over to Michael and I gave him a hug and I said, you know, Michael, I'm glad you're here, but by the end of the week, I may hate you.
From the first night in intensive care to this day, Andy Gromer never found that hatred for me. The Gromers and the McBrides gained a rapport of parents who both lost a child. We made a connection between two families devastated by the same tragedy.
Connor had been allowed to put 4 people on his visitation list, and the McBrides had told us earlier in the week that he put my name on his list.
And as I'm walking, I start shaking, I start crying. And I just started saying, I'm so sorry, I am so sorry. I just couldn't express enough how deeply and truly sorry I was. And that's when she said, you know, Connor, no matter what happens, we love you and we forgive you. It was very, very emotional.
When this happened, I know the thought in my head was that I knew what forgiveness was. Forgiveness meant peace. Forgiveness meant freedom. I can't define Connor by that one moment. You know, because if I define Connor as a murderer, then I define my daughter as a murder victim. I know that's the way she died, but it's not how I want to remember her, and it's not, you know, that's not the life she lived.
Suddenly, my 18-year-old son was an adult and in jail, and we knew he would be going to prison. And even though we had nurtured him all of his life, suddenly he was part of the Florida judicial system, and we had no say in anything about him.
We did not matter.
We didn't matter at all. We were just collateral damage with the tragedy. But with restorative justice, we were given a voice. We were able to participate on an equal playing field with everyone else.
It just seemed almost too incredible to believe that the victim and the offender would sit down together and work things out, and that somehow we would have a voice in what was going on. It was completely the opposite of what the state attorney was telling us, which was that, you know, the victims and the offenders are kept as far apart as possible. We won't have to see them. We won't have to testify in court. And this process just, was so much more involvement on our part.
I remember Jack Campbell said that he would take care of everything and we wouldn't have to do anything, and he would look out for the rights of Anne. And I remember that thinking, that's not right, and that I'm her father. I should have a say-so in what happens to Anne.
The first time that restorative justice was presented to me, I was suspicious of it. It was very unconventional, and I was surprised that the Grommaires would be interested in taking that particular tact. The restorative justice and people who do this process from the prosecution need to recognize that it can be abused, it can be criticized, and you need to recognize what you're getting yourself into.
I didn't think that a restorative justice process would be possible in the state capital of the state that is very punitive in the way in which it approaches violence and gun violence in particular, and this was a gun crime. So over the course of 6 months, I worked closely with Connor and with the McBrides and with the Grommaires, having lengthy conversations with them about what would they want this restorative justice process to look like. We also spoke with attorneys about how legally could we make this happen. And then the Grommaires were meeting with the DA to express their desire to see this happen.
And so anytime you have to be really careful that when you set up one system that in no way you're judging others who might not want. The next family, and I've unfortunately dealt with dozens of families at this point in my career who have had family members murdered, and there's no right way for them to deal with it. There's their process.
Jack Campbell, the state attorney, read the charges against Connor, and then we were allowed to tell Connor what Anne meant to us, and then what her death meant to us, what losing her meant in our lives.
It was so difficult to sit no farther than we are apart and to hear that hurt, that heartbreak, that pain that I'd caused, to see it on their faces, to hear it in their voices. That made it so much more real. I couldn't just hide behind the prison walls. I couldn't just push them out of my mind and never see them again and never think about them again and just push it away. No, I had to face them.
So part of restorative justice was, for me, was to answer those questions. What happened between the time I saw my daughter alive and well on Saturday afternoon until the next day when she was shot? And I did get those answers, and even though it made no sense, I realized there was nothing I could do, and it gave me a sense of peace.
At the Restorative Justice Circle, when I had the opportunity to speak, my brother died when he was 44, 6 months after my dad died. And I became a very angry person. I feel like my 10-year-old boy at the time grew up with a very angry person. I told Connor that he might accept responsibility for this, but he couldn't take all the blame. I felt like his angry old man taught him his way. And being part of that, being able to stand up in front of a group of people and say that, allowed me to be better. I feel like I'm not the angry SOB I was for so many years after my brother Billy died. And so the Restorative Justice Circle is healing for more than just the offender, more than just the victims.
I think if Connor had gone to trial, he would have spent the rest of his life in prison. So he was 18, 19 when this was committed. So he will be out at 38, 39 years of age. There's a lot of living left to do at 38 and 39. So what he does when he gets out of prison will be my gift or my damnation to the community.
My hope is that we don't make Connor an exception and say, oh, this is some freak thing that happened with this one kid, but rather that it helps us build a bridge to all the people that we would put into this label of murderer. And if we can open our hearts to Connor, that maybe we could open our hearts to everyone that we're shoving into that box, right? And that there's actually no difference. And I'm sure Connor is learning in prison that there's actually no difference in who his heart, what his heart is, and what his character is than all the other people that we might think of as the bad guys, right? That everyone has a possibility for redemption, and everyone has a story.
I would never, ever, ever have dared to ask forgiveness from you. And I consider the strength you've shown and the attitude you've adopted as an undeserved blessing to me, in the sense that our correspondence is a gift, not a burden to me.
I find myself on paper with my pen as my compass. When I'm lost, my pen touches paper and shows me direction, a map into my being. My pen is my cartographer, the paper my topography. Out of that correspondence, we each found some healing. We made a decision to try and share that healing with other people that were experiencing similar things in their lives, and we chose to write a book.
Agnes, we're coming to say hello to
Okay,
Bob
nice
Wilhelm.
to see you.
The McBrides, because our son is also at Wakulla.
So.
When this happened, it was such a blow to us. We got a collect call from the county jail, and I thought, oh, he's gotten a DUI or a ticket or something. Darn it! And we couldn't get to the phone in time, so we went on the computer list to see what he was in there for, and it said homicide, not by motor vehicle. We were stunned.
And it was an accidental shooting.
Yeah.
That's how quickly things turned.
Yes.
And I'm an attorney myself, and so we just focused on what do we have to do legally, and we raced over here to get a lawyer and all that, and it consumed us, and we did not have a chance to stop and take a breath and think about, the other family involved.
Well, and then and the attorneys will tell you right away not to approach the other families. And that's where I think a lot of the damage.
We appreciate your story and what you do for people who are caught up in this situation.
Agnes is an extraordinary woman who advocates and is a great example. That's how I got to know her in the community. Once again, I do a lot of homicides. So I unfortunately am able to show her as an example as to how people can go on. Quite often they come to us in the criminal and they don't think they can survive. They can't live on without the lost. Agnes is an example that not only can you live, you can be happy, you can be successful, and you can help other people even after everything has been taken from you.
Restorative justice is still embryonic in the United States, but it can have an extraordinary influence when put into practice. Renee Napier lost her daughter in a car accident caused by Eric Smallridge. Thanks to restorative justice and all of Renee's efforts, Eric is now free.
On May 11th, 2002, my daughter Megan and her friend Lisa Dixon were killed by a drunk driver. At the very beginning of all of this, the tragedy, it was devastating. It was my worst nightmare coming true, and I honestly never thought that I could move forward in my life and have joy again.
Right after the accident, my mind was kind of blank. So many people had told me not to drink and drive, and I just unfortunately didn't take it seriously. And so my mind was on the victims. When I was told that 2 girls had perished because of a choice that I made, my life kind of spun out of control, and I really wasn't sure what the meaning of life was anymore.
I don't need to be punished. I'm only sorry to the families for what I've done. I've caused so much pain, and there's nothing I can do. I would honestly give my life if I could. to bring this back to you. I don't know how it must feel, but I know what I'm going through.
On the day of Eric's sentencing, we heard the judge say 11 years for Megan, 11 years for Lisa, and he was going to run those sentences consecutively for 22 years. And I left the courtroom that afternoon and I felt good about justice, thinking, okay, I've got justice. But my heart was still heavy. I had this burden on me, and then I had to process through that. And as I processed through it, I realized it did not matter how long Eric went to prison. My heart was still hurting, and that was not going to make Megan and Lisa could come back. The only way for me to feel better was if they could come back. And so I at some point, it dawned on me, hating him, wanting revenge on him, wanting him to rot in prison was not going to do anybody any good, because it cannot bring those two girls back. I felt like it would be detrimental for him to be in prison for 22 years. So we went back and asked the judge to restructure his sentence to concurrent sentences. He got 11 years for each girl, and they were run consecutively for 22 years. We asked him to structure them so he could serve them at the same time and get out after 11 years.
Yeah, my family is extremely grateful to Renee and her family and the Dixon family because of the effort they put into helping me get my sentence reduced, because honestly, my dad, for instance, wasn't even sure that his health would hold up long enough to see me as a free man again. So I wanted to do anything I could that was positive, that might help somebody. And so they said they would take pictures and use some of the pictures maybe from the trial in order to have this shock value for this campaign they were doing. And it was very shocking. And you know, your first instinct would be to hang your head in shame. And honestly, when I saw it for the first time, I was happy it looked so bad. And the reason why is because it was shocking, and I was hoping that maybe I could be part of something positive.
I just felt like I knew my new mission in life would be to educate people about the dangers of drinking and driving. I started doing presentations in 2004, and Eric was incarcerated, so he couldn't join me. Over the course of time, I was able to have him join me on video, and then in 2010, we were able to do our presentation together for the first time. He was incarcerated, chained, shackled, handcuffed. Since the beginning, probably several 100,000, maybe 300,000 people have heard the story, and many more on the internet. The first thing that I want you to understand is that when you forgive someone, you're not telling them that what they did to you is okay, because you know what? It is not okay. And it does not erase what they have done. And it doesn't mean that they shouldn't be punished. That's not what forgiveness is about. If you don't forgive, it's like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Eric Smallridge was a good person, and he didn't plan to go out that night. He didn't say, hey, I think I'll go to the beach, drink a bunch of beer, and on my way home, kill two girls. That was not his intention. But that's what happened. Good people are killing innocent people on our roads every single day. So when you're out with your friends and there's drinking or drugs involved, and you know you shouldn't be driving, and that is, even if it's one beer, smoked a joint, whatever it is that you guys are doing. Is that not what you call it? I'm from the 70s. That's what it was called back then. Whatever that is. I want to encourage you to get someone else to get you home. Your stories are important. If you want to come down here and say to me, I promise I'm going to value my life and I'm going to make the right choices when I'm in my car, that means more to me than any diamond that I could ever have. And I promise you I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
It wasn't that long ago that I was you. And I had every opportunity to succeed, just like y'all have right now. Remember, you only live once. And let me tell you something, you know that one life I had to live? You think I wanted to live it locked up like an animal? Y'all saw the car out front? That accident took 4 seconds. You don't think it's gonna be you. But if you're doing it, guess what? It can be you. That's what I was like, man, let's just get there, let's drink some beer. And maybe you heard somebody say this, I know my limit. I won't drink too much. What's the first thing alcohol affects? And drugs, what do they affect first? Your brain. When we make a plan that doesn't involve how we're getting home, alcohol seeps into your brain. They call it liquid courage. All you have to do today is say, I'm gonna make sure it doesn't happen to me. You know why? Because I'm not gonna do it. It's kind of scary to think about what would have happened if there was no restorative justice, there was no forgiveness. I would still be incarcerated, but prison's a very harsh place, and I think I'd be a very different person.
Restorative justice has allowed me to really see the future. If it wasn't for the restorative justice circle, if it wasn't for that discussion, I probably never would have gotten a sentence where I would ever get out of prison.
To me, that would have been a waste. And I just saw restorative justice as a way to say to these people who are incarcerated, yes, you may have to be away from us for a time because you did something wrong and you have to figure out what it is about yourself that put you in this place. But we also recognize that you're going to come back to us and you're going to join us again. And we want you to know that when you come back, we want to welcome you back into and we want you to be productive members.
I'm working in the law library right now, so I'm thinking about something with working as maybe a paralegal when I get out or something like that. I'm still going to school, I'm still taking college courses, so hopefully by the time I get out, I will have a college degree. So I'm thinking about a career.
So ever since coming back into society, even though there are obstacles, I've had the blessing of being able to put my life back together. I'm employed by Goodwill, I'm a retail manager. You know, after prison, people wonder about it. Maybe they might wonder about, how a social life is. And for me, honestly, there's not much of one. Thank you, ma'am. We all know that people get hurt drinking and driving. We all know that there's really bad consequences. But for those who it hasn't happened to, they know better. And it's always on their conscience. But then when they run into an old friend, like a really good friend, that actually got in trouble, took the lives of two people, it actually makes their conscience, and this is only my opinion, it makes their conscience like elevated, and they almost see you as a living conscience, and they don't want to be around you. So they don't invite you to the parties. They don't want to hang around because they don't want to feel bad about what they're doing. What's up, man? Reintegrating into society, becoming reestablished is never easy. And for me, with having been forgiven and getting out so much earlier, I mean, every day was a great day. But of course, I had to start at the very bottom. I started as just a processor. I actually wrapped wires for a long time, even though I have a college degree, but I was just grateful to have employment. But now it's just like such a blessing that instead of sitting in a prison cell somewhere, I can actually come to work every day, be a productive, gainful member of society, pay taxes.
No one's eyes can hide me from myself here. There is no music to soothe my savage beasts. My delusions crumble like old leaves in winter.
Seeking somehow to make a difference, to build bridges and open doors, he became part of the solution. Unbidden words, phrases, and moments to ponder, these flickers of light dancing in darkness. Much of our society thinks of a criminal justice system as punitive and no hope. He has 2 life sentences, plus 34 years, I believe, which has always seemed ludicrous to me. It serves no purpose for anybody. I'm still waiting to meet the first person that starts the 2nd life sentence.
Agnes was the first person to say that you're not a murderer. You are a man who murdered, and there is a difference. Prior to that, I couldn't really grasp that. And so I lived as a murderer and as a killer. And what does that mean if a man defines himself in that way? I wasn't who I was. I made a terrible mistake. For a long time, I allowed myself to be defined by that mistake. Agnes stopped that. And once she stopped that, I was able to begin to look at myself as a man, as a human being, and that was the beginning of a change. When she challenged me and said that I could make a difference in here, she gave me hope and she gave me purpose.
We leave a part of us with whoever we're talking with, and we get changed by whoever we're talking with. And even though Leonard is in prison, he is living in a community with other men. And he has an opportunity to make a difference for them. And he has made a commitment to try and do that.
So the idea that, you could take a peacemaker's ideology and philosophy, and apply it in an environment where, virtually daily men are getting cut across the face with razor blades and getting stabbed and all of this. To apply it builds strength, builds power.
The Gromare's decision to forgive me and their decision to use restorative justice has given me a desire to give back. And so, I can tell them and show them really with my actions how I'm still improving, still working on myself, the things how I'm growing and maturing, and show them that I'm not still the person that killed their daughter.
I wanted him to do as much as he could. He can't replace Anne's life, but in the circle I told him, I said, you have to do the good works of two people now, Connor. And that's something he remembers, and that's something that stayed with him.
Here in this prison, they have a program called Quest, and I'm privileged enough to be able to facilitate and be one of the facilitators for Quest. It covers topics like life choices, accepting responsibility, and then it moves into harms like family violence, anger, drug abuse. And it really looks at your life, your whole life, and why you've been making the choices you've been making, what has happened to you. So let's start out. Does anybody have anything they'd like to share, anything that they got from reading Chapter 10 on restorative justice?
It's a big misnomer about men in prison that they're goons and goblins. In reality, they're just a bunch of beat up, hurt people that are afraid to look themselves in the mirror. They don't want to come to grips with the reality of how bad they hurt themselves or hurt other people's lives. I have a homicide charge. And I think for a decade, I didn't even want to think about it.
I know one of the most frustrating things for us is that because of the laws in Florida, we can't reach out. We can't reach out and apologize. We can't reach out and say, we're sorry.
While we're here learning to better ourselves, to learn from our mistake or grow and see why it happened, to heal ourselves, they have no idea.
And the biggest thing we can do is work on ourselves, because that's huge. I mean, if we can't understand why it happened, what's going to happen?
You're going to do it again.
It's going to do it again.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And we all know hurt people, but healed people help people.
For 18 years, I suppressed any emotional response. And then over the last 10 years, I've kind of been trying to open that up. It's kind of difficult. It's hard to open up what we see in the way.
Why did I do this? Well, at the time that I was asked that in court, I didn't have an answer. I don't know. I just did it. I don't know why I did it. Now I'm getting to the point of where I can say, okay, I can see influences, not causes. I'm not laying the blame on something else. The blame is still mine. The responsibility is still mine. But I can see the influences, like Ray. I was raped when I was 12 years old by a cousin of mine who was 18 at the time. Do I hold that responsible for my behavior? Absolutely not. However, I do know it had a great influence. I've written my cousin several times. I've written my victim several times. Of course, I don't even have my victim's address, so I can't deliver it, but probably about half of them are letters to myself. Because until I've cleansed myself of those demons, I can't help anybody else.
Standing at the edge of the cliff at the top of the bridge invites terror. Ancestors, siblings, descendants walked through the thin space. But why do I still live? Because the universe has plans, I hear.
The blood running down the valleys and grooves carved into my skin smelled like 100 wet pennies. I slipped from under you, ran and jumped down 2 flights of stairs, thinking, I gotta get away, gotta run, got to get the hell out of here, can't let them hit me no more. I really didn't know anything about love because those who were charged to love me were, abusive and destructive, so I thought that, love involved a lot of pain. My family's emotional issues were a little bit severe because it was a lot of addiction, and alcohol abuse, and sexual abuse, and every kind of dysfunction that one can imagine. My stepfather, he would beat me with extension cords and hangers, and after every beating, he would tell me, it hurt me more than it hurt you, and I only did it because I love you. It communicated the wrong message, and I hurt everyone that I loved.
So Baltimore at the time was falling into the height of the crack epidemic. People were making a lot of money selling drugs, selling crack, and it looked glamorous. And the reality is, me and my brother, we were smoking crack and we were selling crack, and so he sort of fell into, at that age, what we were doing. I was carrying a gun, Big Leonard had a gun. We were, in the street, in the throes.
At that time, there was what they call open-air drug markets in Baltimore, where you could go anytime day or night and buy crack cocaine. It caused people to do anything to get more. So it was a powerful, powerful drug that had a lot of different side effects. And the main side effect was, as you were coming down, you were so devastatingly low that you wanted to hurt yourself. So that's the beast that's in crack cocaine. And I didn't recognize it at first in Leonard. And I think that's because I didn't want to.
And when I look at Leonard and I saw it, but I didn't know his tragedy at that time. You see, this is the difference. I didn't know he had been beaten. I didn't know all of those things was a part of his story. He hadn't relayed those pieces. So but what I would see behind him, you could see it in his writing. His writing was sort of dark. His writing was from that place of pain.
This is the thing about Baltimore. Sometimes you can look into the black sky, pocked white with starlight, and imagine for a moment that the city doesn't rage beneath your feet. But that sense of peace doesn't last. The city won't let you forget that she owns you. Her alleys are veins, and you're the lifeblood flowing into the streets that are her arteries, carrying you through her decaying body. She is the undead, rotten with plague. If you are not diseased before you enter her, she will infect you before you leave. But I loved the sickness, even found freedom in it.
You should have saw him when he did his written words. The depth of how he could talk and, how he could sway the room. And when I heard all of it, because, you know, it came in pieces, you know, because I heard about Pat, but I didn't hear. Then they sort of told me about Chris and then how Chris was found and all that. I mean, I don't know, man. There's no words for that. I just can't. It hurts, you know. And then the things they wrote about him in the paper down there. Yeah. Like, you know, he just came from Baltimore and came down here and killed somebody. It's just like, we're like, that's it. That's all, you know, the whole article, you know, just. But what else would you see if you don't? Because all you can see is what most of the time all you see is what somebody did. You don't see who they are.
Restorative justice might have detected Leonard's problems. In Tallahassee, the Community Connections program takes action to prevent juvenile delinquency. It allows 150 young people to participate in discussion circles with caseworkers, family members, and community volunteers.
They come to us usually by way of they've committed some crime and the state attorney offers them to come to Community Connections as a diversion to going to court. Some of them come to us as they've already gone to court, been found guilty. Now they're on probation, and this is part of their probation to come to the Community Connections program. And then we take a few kids that are referred to us by the community.
I know that you are here because your mom actually called to get you involved in the program. But I also know that you have had some things going on for you. So we're going to talk about that, not to bash you, but really more to figure out what do you want to get out of the program? How can we best serve you over the course of 3 months, right?
There is some research now, even here in Florida, that's linking the kids that are in our juvenile detention centers. A huge majority of those kids, they are linking to having had trauma when they were kids. So they're just playing that out over and over again, you know? So if you've had a whole population of people that have trauma, you don't punish them more because that's just more trauma on top of trauma, right? The way that you have to deal with the trauma is you have to build safe spaces.
I also read in the report, were you openly arrested in your classroom on the grounds, handcuffed?
I got arrested like 30 or 40 minutes after the case. And then the sheriff took me to Jack. I had to sit there for like 45 minutes.
Last year, I think we had maybe 5% of the teens get back involved with the law, you know, within the year. So from what I've compared it to in traditional settings, that's definitely better.
We are in the habit of incarcerating, and we are in the habit of finding blame, ascribing blame, and delivering pain to those who have done harm, rather than to think from a problem-solving and a victim-centered perspective. That's a habit that we're in the United States. And it's also become a very entrenched habit, and it is a habit that has many systems built around it, and there are many jobs attached to it.
These bars cut the sun into black strips of shadows that claw these walls, flay the soul, hammer the mind to pulp. I take the pen and carve tears into white pages, running from shadows, delving into reflection, puking my sins into the light of day. I take the pen and scream.
There is a part of us that needs to rage. God bless my anger and grief. Fill my eyes with healing tears of rage. But I am afraid to be angry. Rage betrays the need to accept what has happened. Yeah, so at some point I decided that I wanted to talk with him. And like you said, I wanted to be heard. I wanted to understand. I wanted to know him. I requested many times for permission and was denied.
In a way, I can understand why they wouldn't if they've not been through what we've been through.
Yeah.
But they don't understand how important that is for our healing.
Yeah, and at that prison, he wound up getting beaten pretty badly.
Really?
Beaten and gassed. So it's kind of...
And you think it's because of you reaching out to try to...
Yeah,
is it because are y'all in communication with each other? Does he write and you write? Have you ever talked to him on the phone?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And you know they listen.
yeah,
Yes,
and,
of course.
and they've canceled our telephone privileges more than once.
Yeah. Wow. It's really sad though because they don't see the big picture.
No, no. All they see is you saw his face. They see him, and they see what they perceive to be a pitiful little old lady.
Yeah, right.
And they make conclusions
Yeah,
from that.
They do. And they don't know your heart, and they don't know that you're not naive.
No.
It's not like you're not aware of charming people
Yes,
that are trying to
absolutely.
schmooze you. And it's not like you're going to be able to do anything for him, really. I mean, he's sentenced to life, isn't he?
Yeah. 2.
Yeah, so he's not coming out.
Since 2011, I've been transferred to 6, maybe 7 prisons because of this, because of restorative justice, because of my relationship with Agnes. What we are about is healing, transformation, justice, reconciliation, love. That's what we are about. That is what we practice. That is what we teach. That is what we communicate. So why is the response that we get violence?
So I've tried to explain that it is healing and that it is part of the process, and that as a victim, I choose what heals me. And unfortunately, they hear me not.
She is this small, tiny, diminutive woman who is bigger than anyone that I know. And no one knows. None of the people celebrating her, none of those who love her, know what this has cost her over these years, because she has struggled. I emphasize again, she's gotten a lot of flack because of her position. She's gone through many nights doubting herself, doubting her own capabilities, because people have tried to demean her because of the position that she's taken. Yet and still, she always presses forward no matter what. No matter how far out of her comfort zone she goes, she presses forward relentlessly. And I don't know anyone like that. She is an extraordinary human being. Extraordinary. And she doesn't even know it.
Several years ago, I was volunteering at the prison in their Quest program. Initially, I did a victim impact program. It was a really positive experience. Then at some point in time, the department decided that I was unwelcome and suspended me from being a volunteer.
How many guys was with us when Miss Agnes first came to us? This is by hands. Let's see. I know, and I personally felt like just really inside, really moved to the ideal of being able to look at these other folks who we had this impact on, and it's all we could do was just wait till the next week when she would get here and give us more. And it was just amazing in terms of the effect that it had on the group of guys who was with us during that time.
She's real strong and firm in her handshake, you know what I'm saying? She look you dead in the eye when she shake your hand. It was never something no turn away. And what I learned from her, while she was telling the story, is that she never showed no serious reaction to the part of her pain. But she stood and she told it with the confidence of her love that she has in her heart. She expressed herself in a way that she understands.
When she brought that piece to us, it was like this revolutionary concept of moving forward in terms of changing what we were looking at in terms of Quest.
There are a lot of things that we don't know and that remain hidden in our departments of corrections across the country about what the reasons are that we don't, that there are sort of denials of things. And so my understanding is that Agnes has been seeking the opportunity to be in direct dialogue with Leonard and continues to be denied that. And from my side, when a crime victim wants to sit down face to face with the person that took their daughter's life, that took their grandchild's life, they should have that opportunity, right? That's one piece. And another piece is that the secrecy around the reasons for that not occurring don't feel okay, you know? And without transparency, it's too easy for us to ask questions like, is it the racial background of the parties, right? Is it Agnes's outspokenness about her dissatisfaction with the criminal legal system and how it didn't meet her needs that causes people to hesitate to do what she is asking for. In the end, she is a mother who lost and a grandmother who lost her daughter and her grandchild, and this is her genuine request of the system. And I think that it's a request that should be honored.
Dear Sir, the man who murdered my daughter and grandson is incarcerated in your department. After several years of my own healing, I wanted to meet with him and was told that it was not allowed for a victim to meet with the inmate in Florida. As it is apparent that there have been several exceptions made to the existing rule, I again request that I be allowed to visit the inmate. Thank you for considering this request. Agnes Fury.